Tonight, we're going to look at Operation Overlord, better known as the D-Day invasion. Now, to review, the Nazis have controlled and conquered most of Europe by 1944. But as we've seen in the animated map in the classroom, this is starting to change as they start to lose in places like Italy and Russia. Now, just like in World War I, or the Great War, the Nazis are now fighting a two-front war once again. Remember, for every one soldier that fights on the Western Front, 13 fight on the Eastern Front. Now, as we've talked about in class, Joseph Stalin is begging the Americans and the British for an invasion of France. Now, the invasion was called Operation Overlord, and to be honest, the United States wanted to invade much earlier, but Winston Churchill and the British said, no, it needs more time. We need to organize this correctly. So as you know, the first invasion of Europe happens through North Africa and Italy, and all the while, the Allies are planning this major invasion to liberate France from German control. Now, as I said, the British and the Americans are gathering all of these supplies in England, and they're planning to invade by crossing the English Channel. Now, the Germans can guess that an attack will come, but as it says on the screen, they don't know when nor where. Now, the Germans are at some disadvantages here for a few reasons. The first is that in France, even though France has fallen, there is something called the French resistance. Vive la résistance! And the French resistance is fighting to sabotage the German plans and the German occupation of France. So they're doing little things like disrupting the German communications or hurting their transportation. Now, the cool thing to me is that the Nazis don't know that the Allies in England are communicating with the French resistance by the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. And so what the BBC does is it's sending special coded messages to the French resistance. Now, right before D-Day happened, there are some special poems that are read which are announcing when and where the attack will happen. So the resistance knows it's time to get ready. Isn't this an epic photograph? The French resistance fighting behind barricades in a city somewhere in France. And as I said, the resistance are doing little things such as disrupting the communications lines, or destroying the railroad lines, or trying to destroy the ammunition or supplies of the Nazis. Now, at the same time, the Allies don't want the Germans to know where the invasion will land. So what they're doing is they are actually planning a fake invasion at a place called Dover in England. Now, between Dover, England, and Calais, France, this is the narrowmost point in the English Channel. So what the Allies do a good job of making it look like is that they are gathering for an invasion here. So they have real men, real supplies, real equipment, and they're led by a real American general, General George S. Patton, who was in sort of timeout in punishment because he slapped one of his soldiers. And so his job now is to lead this fake invasion, meaning he just has to sit and babysit all of these soldiers. Now, the cool part to me is that the Allies are making all of these radio transmissions, meaning they're communicating on the radio that the invasion will take place soon from Dover to Calais, knowing that the Germans are listening to them. So again, all of this is to throw the Germans off. Here's George S. Patton right here. And the last disadvantage, I think, for the Nazis is that their power structure was so regimented and so inflexible that Hitler had to order all major developments. So if something happened, like a surprise attack, which will happen at Normandy, the Nazis are not authorized to bring in supplies or backup support or more troops, more weapons, because Hitler didn't order it. So guess what? When the invasion takes place on the morning of June 6th, 1944, nobody can find Hitler. So the invasion doesn't happen at Calais at all, but further west at a place called Normandy, which is a region of France. Now, as you'll see in a second, the Allies will split the beaches of Normandy over a 50-mile distance into 5 separate beaches, and they will split these between American, British, and Canadian invasion units. Now, you can see right here the 5 beaches, and they're called Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Now, while the invasion was to take place early in the morning of June the 6th, overnight, the Allies, the British and the Americans, were dropping paratroopers, meaning men with parachutes, out of airplanes behind enemy lines in order to destroy German defenses. This invasion had been planned for some time and the men were ready. However, the Allies had to wait until conditions were perfect. Favorable to their invasion would be a very light moon. Okay, so there's practically no moonlight, and so since they are invading early in the morning of June the 6th, there's not a lot of light on these boats that are carrying these men. It also would help based on the tide conditions. They want the tide to be coming in so that there is as little beach as possible, meaning there's less time for their men to be on the beach, vulnerable to German attack. So the size of this attack has never been seen before in history, meaning it's unprecedented. This includes 156,000 men on the single day. These men were in 5,000 boats. More than 50,000 vehicles would be landed, including things like tanks and trucks. And 11,000 airplanes are used for aerial support. Now, the person who planned and organized this mission was General Dwight D. Eisnenhower, future United States President. And on the morning of this attack, he recorded this speech to all of the soldiers and sailors who were ready to invade France. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark on a great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere go with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But in this year of 1944, much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940 and 1941. The United Nations have inflicted upon the German great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war and have placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together in victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking. Now, Mr. Duncan here again. One of the things that is really special to me is that my grandfather heard this speech because he was involved in this landing. So I joke that my middle name is Danger Duncan. My grandfather was the original Danger Duncan. Now, by June 11th, more than 326,000 Allied soldiers had landed in France, and that includes 100,000 tons of equipment. Now, this is the scene that soldiers would have seen as they landed on the beaches in Normandy. Now, so they would have been in their boats, gotten in these landing crafts, which are like floating boxes, and the end, as you see right here, would come down, and then they would have to run through the water, think how easy that is, and try to jump up on the beach and fight against the Nazis who are firing weapons at them from the beaches, okay? So this is a really intense scene. By far the best movie version of this is Saving Private Ryan. I could not find a clip to show you in here, but again, it feels like you are actually there on the beach. Now this is another scene. As you can see, the tide is much higher, and so these soldiers could simply get off the boat and not have to wade through the water. Obviously, this is a lot better. So you can see in this graphic right here, and even though we don't speak Italian, we can understand what's happening. This is a great graphic for what the beach must have looked like. So you can see these men right here are getting off their landing craft, and they are running on the beach, trying to survive the attack and then fire back against the Nazis. Now, other types of battleships up here are providing cover or support for these soldiers who are landing on the beach. Then you have bigger landing crafts like this right here, or even right here, this floating craft that will contain trucks and tanks. Now, this is a famous photograph, and this actually happened after the invasion was successful. I like this photograph because you can see just how many trucks and tanks were used, and so you can get a sense of just how much organization went into this invasion. Now, look up here at these blimps, these balloons. Do you have any idea what the balloons may have been used for? Now, the overall impact and effect of this successful invasion can really never be stated enough, because this changed the entire war in Europe for World War II. As we know, Italy is defeated, and the Italians are tired of fighting, and they're also tired of Mussolini. On the Eastern Front, the Soviet soldiers are now pushing the Nazis back, and they're about to invade Nazi Germany. So this is truly the beginning of the end for the Nazis in World War II. Now, obviously, this is a very costly invasion because the Germans fought very well, and they were in a very good position to defend their beaches. So this is a super costly attack with thousands who died on the day of invasion. However, there were so many soldiers and so many supplies from the Allies that eventually they broke through, and within 2 months had liberated Paris from the Nazis. And this is where those who lost their life at Normandy Beach are buried today. Thanks, guys. Have a nice weekend.